Right, before we get on to sorting the standard calipers out, just an update on the Deuce, on the brakes. The front brake that I rebuilt, the front brake caliper, the Performance Machine one, works absolutely perfect now. But I had another incident with the back brake. People who've watched these videos will know that my back brake seized on, warped the disc and everything. That's when I then modified the swing arm to take the new Performance Machine caliper. And it basically, there's a saying, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. And to be truthful, it's fucking true. I was out, I've done, since I put the bike back on the road with the rebuilt front caliper and that, I've done just over 500 mile on it. And I was out the other day on a run and basically back brake locked on. Caught it. I don't need a new disc. Thankfully I haven't worn away all my brake pads, but it locked on and I caught it in time. But I was thinking to myself, well, that's a brand new caliper. Why has it done it? Now, on the old one, on the old Harley Davidson standard caliper that was on the bike, it wasn't working properly to start with. I mean, it worked, it braked, but it wasn't 100%. And I just assumed that that was what the problem had been. And when I tested it afterwards, pushing it, there was that piston that was sticking that I showed in the video, and I just assumed that it was that was the problem. Because the master cylinder was brand new, never even give that a thought. Now, that's where the assumption is all fuck-ups comes into it. I assumed that because that was brand new it was okay, but when the new Performance Machine caliper did the same thing, I then started having a look at the brake system on it. Now, I don't know how well this will show up. Right, I think this is where I left off. Inside your master cylinder, you can see in there's two holes. I'll explain what that. I'm going to do a quick explanation, just in layman's terms, how a master cylinder works. Most of you will obviously know, but for those that don't, you've got all this gubbins that's inside. Now, at the end of the day, what it makes is a plunger. Goes in this hole at the end, all this slot here goes in here. Then the rod off your, I'll use a screwdriver. The rod off your brake pedal goes into through a seal in the end, and it pushes in and out. Hence, when you push it, you activate your back brake. When you let it off, back brake releases. What that's controlled by is a spring with a lump in the end. Then this thing here, like a rubber cup, goes on there. You've got your plunger, which pushes against that. Obviously that'll have that seal in it. That'll have the seal in it there. Then that goes in the end of the actual body. And then all that pushes in. The pressure is on this bit here. It pushes the fluid into your brake, activates your brake. When you release it, it springs back on that spring and lets the brake fluid back up into the reservoir. Now this is where these two holes come in. That's just like the first hole there is like a pressure, just a release for when the whole thing moves in and out. That one there, when you brake, I'm just going to pretend that that's the plunger, that's this bit here. When you brake, your plunger sits about there. When you brake, it pushes past that hole, which then pressurizes the system, pushes fluid out through your brake line, which comes out of this bit here. but then when it releases just past that hole. That brake fluid then comes back up into the reservoir, releasing your back brake. Now the issue I've had here, this piece here, which is the seal that the push rod off your brake pedal goes through that hole, that sits in the end of here, and it's held in, goes in the end of there like that, and it's held in with a circlip. But when you put the circlip in, there's just under 1.5 mil of movement. I'll see if I can get it to do it. That can move in and out. Don't know if you can see that actually moving. So if you imagine every time you're pressing your pedal, that's moving in and out. Well, sometimes it can come sideways and jams in place. Well, when it's out at its full extent, when it pushes out against the circlip, all this lot here clears that hole, so it releases the fluid. If that kinks, so it's not sitting straight, the plunger then hits the back of that, but it's not actually clearing the hole, so then your back brake locks on. So what I've done, sorted a washer, got it to the right size, that'll sit in against the top of that, so that when it goes back in, I can put it together, the seal part will go in, then that washer will go in, then the circlip will go in, but that bit there with the seal on it cannot move at all. So that's everything in place. It's sticking, there it is, it's come out now. But as I've explained to you, when it was stuck in towards the internal part, that was too long to release all the way back. So what I've done is I've took that piece, which is the plunger, and I've put it in a lathe, and I've turned 1 millimetre off each end of it. Now that end is where your bar off your foot peg, off your brake pedal, the bar that comes through that seal goes through that, and it sits inside there, and it pushes it in and out, like as you brake it pushes in, and when you release it pulls back out. So I've took 1 millimetre off each end of that to make that 2 mil shorter, and when I've done all my measuring up with me verniers, I've now got clearance. It'll clear that hole every time. So now that'll be sorted. Now that what I was trying to say at the beginning about assumption being the mother of all fuck-ups, I assumed that the old Harley back brake was playing up anyways, and assumed because that was brand new that it obviously was the back brake that was the issue. Turns out I don't think it was the back brake at all. I think it was this. Basically, if you imagine you're pressurising a system with hydraulic fluid, the only way that system can then release the caliper, as in the pistons, to come back, is it's got to release the pressure on the pistons. Now that pressure can't release because the plunger's not going past the second hole to release the pressure, and that's why the back brake was sticking on. So that's what I've done. That's the update. Once I've got this all back together, clean the brake up and everything, make sure everything's 100% on that. As I say, I caught it in time, so there's no damage or anything like that. The disc's fine, but I just want to make sure, like the brake dust wise, clean all the brake dust out of it, because it did wear the pads a little bit. But say I've maybe lost maybe 1 millimetre off each pad, so there'll be brake dust to clean up. So I'll clean that up and just double check everything. Once that's back together, it'll work fine, and that should be my issues with braking sorted. So I just thought I'd give you an update on what was happening before we got on with these standard calipers. So I'll knock you off, and then we'll get these started on these calipers. I'll build this up first. You don't need to watch how that goes back together, but I'll build this up first and get it done and out of the way, and then I'll get started on these calipers. Right, back soon. Right, finally I'm going to get onto these standard Harley-Davidson calipers. But first I've refitted should I say, that master cylinder off the Deuce, the one that was playing up, and I've done quite a few miles on it since. I don't know the exact number, but I've done a lot of miles and it's been absolutely spot on. So that's cured that problem now. So now I'm getting on to rebuilding these calipers. But first, just a quick thing about brake fluid. Because I'm going to be selling these calipers, I'm going to rebuild them using .5 fluid as the lubricant to put all the stuff in and that, as you'll see as I continue on. Now you can see here there's a big fucking difference between the colours between .5 and that in there is .5.1, which is what I use on everything. Now if I was to buy a new Harley-Davidson, and I don't mean brand new, I mean new to me, one of the things I'd do, not straight away, but one of the things I would do is I would drain the brakes right down so that they're empty. Then I'd flush through with the 5.1 and then I'd redo the system with 5.1, re-bleed everything and that. But you cannot mix the two. If I mix that with that, it'll turn to fucking jelly and basically your brakes won't work. So never mix .5 with anything else. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough and it's not coronavirus. So yeah, never mix the two, ever. But what you've got is .5.1, in fact .3, .4 and .5.1, they're all glycol based brake fluids, so you can mix 3, 5.1, you can mix 4 and 3, 4 and 5.1, etc, etc, and it's not a problem. The .5 is a silicon base, well it even says it there, silicon brake fluid. It's a silicon base that does not mix with glycol, so it's a big no-no to mix the two. But as I say, because I'm going to sell these and a lot of Harley-Davidsons come standard with .5 in, I'm going to rebuild these using .5. But I just thought I'd give a quick explanation of the difference between .5 and the others. As I say, never mix them. Fucking telephones. Just see if this is. No one I fucking need to talk to anyway. Right, so I've already stripped these and cleaned them, as in a previous video I've already shown all that, because originally I wasn't going to film these, but because I'm going to be selling them I thought I'll film them going back together so that anyone who's buying them, they can look at the video and see that they have been rebuilt. But these are the old seals that come out. So you've got your little, obviously your thin ones and your thick ones, and then you've got your two small ones that go between the two halves. Now obviously I've bought new ones, so I'll just dump them there out of the way. So I bought a new kit with all new seals. Now what I'll do is I'll crack this bottle open, because I think it's a brand new bottle, and I've got a very clean, I've cleaned it out, just the top with no holes in it. I'm just going to pour some in. So basically what's in there now is just a pile of .5. Another thing about .5 fluid, which is I think why Harley-Davidson and a few others use it, is if you spill this on paint it tends not to affect it, whereas if you spill that on paint and don't get it off, it'll take your fucking paint off. But I digress. So the new seals, just open the packet up, it says hey, fucking still sealed. So yeah, get the seals out and basically just make sure that they're all there, that you've got a full kit. So there should be four thin ones, which there is, 1, 2, 3, 4 thick ones that there is, and the 2 small ones. and then basically drop them all in the brake fluid and just let them soak. So what I'll do is I'll knock you off for a minute, because I'll give them a good 5 minutes to soak in there. I'll also be using the brake fluid to rub round inside here and on the pistons themselves, so when I put it together the brake fluid is going to be the lubricant that I use to put all this lot together. So, but I'll just knock you off for 5 and let them soak, and then once I get these out, what I'll do is I've got the other packet, because obviously it's front and rear caliper, I've got the other new seals. What I'll do is I'll rip them out, put them in and put it to one side, and then that'll be it, they can soak. So I'll be back in a minute. Right, it's been about 5 minutes, went and made myself a brew. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and zoom in a bit and see if I can get closer onto these calipers. Just adjust this camera. Right, just lock that in place. So, I'll start with this half. Get some of this tackle on my finger, and just put a coating of it on the inside. You probably don't need to do this, but it's just one of them extra things. Right, now, I don't know how well you'll see in the caliper body, thick washer and thin washer, gasket, seal, whatever you want to call them. Thick one goes in the bottom, thin one goes in the top. So we'll start with the thick ones first. So pick a thick one out of the goop, and then basically, I don't know how well you're going to see this. You've got to be ever so careful. That was a bit posh. Ever so careful. They can be a right pain in the arse to get in, and you've got to be careful not to twist them. Same as like on the performance machine caliper. You know, you get them in, but you just got to be careful not to twist them when they're going in. You'll hear them pop when they're in position properly, like that. Don't know if you can see there, just at the bottom, bring that in a bit closer. You can see that just that bit there, fucking camera work shit, just in there, that it seals not in properly. So just push it a little bit with your finger and you'll hear it actually click into place. So that's that one in. So I'll do the same with the other part. So get it into its groove and then just feed it in stages. And that one popped down inside rather than going into its slot. So when that happens, get yourself a hook and very carefully just prise it back up and push as it comes up, push it so it goes back there. That's it, popped in. Just push it so it goes into the slot, the groove, whatever you want to call it. The next bit is the thin ones, which are even more of a pain in the fucking ass, because it's such a thin slot to get it in. It can be quite a nightmare at times. Sometimes they're just going no issues at all, other times you'd be fighting the fuckers for ages. And this one's popped down inside. As I say, the thinner seals are a right pain in the arse, but when they go in, they suddenly smooth the cells out, and that's it. And just run your finger round sort of make sure it's pushed all the way in. And there you can see, I think you can see that's top and bottom sealing on that one, so I've got sealing on the other one. Try and keep this in camera view. So again, get it into the groove, and then once it's started in, just feed it in, push around with your finger, and as you can see there, it's sticking up in the air. And when I start to get to that stage, I actually start to come around from the other side and then try and make sure that the back part that's in is all the way back, which makes this bit that's sticking up like just a touch smaller. Just lift it still in, try and lift it and push it in as it comes. And it's a similar sort of thing when this thing goes to the point where it will go in, it sort of just clicks. Sometimes they'll go in dead easy, and other times they'll be a right pain in the arse. Right, I need my magnifying glass here, because I don't know if that's actually twisted. Oh, it hasn't popped in, that's what's wrong. Now, sometimes they get to a point where they just won't clip in, so if you just get your lowel, it's just a case of lifting the bottom so it goes into the actual groove. Patience is required, which not usually something I've got. And if you're using a tool like what I'm using here, don't force it, don't try and stick the tool in. Something's not right there. It's got a lump in it. And that's it, it's gone. That's it. Just take your time with them. They go in. They're designed to go in, but they can be a bit fiddly. And then just get some of this stuff and just make sure it's got a good sort of coating on it. Because with this side, with it being done, the seal's in, I can actually put the pistons back in. So what I'll do, just move that out of the way, is I'll grab two of the pistons and we'll put a coating of fluid on them. You don't really need to put any on the bottom, but I always do. Right. And then basically just put it in and then carefully just make sure you're sort of centralised with your piston. Just push it in and the piston's in. If you force that, just ram it in, you can stand a chance of pulling the seal out, which is not what you want. Just get it sort of sitting as level as you can, and then push. Try and keep it straight as it's going in. You'll get it past the first seal and then it'll go tight against the second one, and then it'll just freely go through because it's passed. So that's the seals in and the pistons back in that half. So put that to one side and we'll get part 2 done, or the second half even. Put the lid back on this. So same as on the other half, thick washer first, seal into the groove, and then once it's sitting in the groove just feed it down and round, and it will go. But as I say, the one thing you've got to be careful of is that it doesn't twist round on itself. That's it, that's just popped in, and that's in all the way. A bit more of that in, and grab one of the other thick one. Now what I tend to do is that if you just squeeze it slightly like that, it goes in, and then using your finger guide it into its groove, and then just push down and feed round with your finger. Now as you do that, it will pull out slightly at this side, but that's when I swap sides, is when I get close. You start pushing that side back in, and that's when you start pushing the seal down and try and push it as straight as you possibly can. That's that popped in, and it won't twist, because these can twist and go in with a twist in them, and then that's it. Basically your caliper's not going to work unless you pull it back out and redo it. So now we'll get onto these thin ones. Now with these, just give it a bit of a pull to the back, slip it in, and once you get to a certain point, which is usually where it pops down on the inside, be careful. As I say, it will put its cell in, and that's that one in. So then you go around, just make sure it's pushed in all the way. Get the next one, which typically is stuck on the bottom. Feed it in. Just basically what I'm doing here is I'm putting it in towards the hole, put my finger in and then pull it slightly to oval it so it fits down in. And then you can fit that bit that you're pulling into that slot, groove even, and start working your way around with it. Give it a pull round. And remember, just don't get arsey with it. If it doesn't go in straight away, just take your time. And it'll get to a point where, like that, where it just slips in. So again, that's that one seals in. Bit of stuff, just lube it up a bit more. Get the pistons. Push the first piston in. Just get it so it's sitting level, and then just force it in, but gently force it in. If you, I know that doesn't really make sense. Force it in gently. But don't put massive pressure on, just let it work its way in. And when it gets past the second, if you need to look to see if you're sticking out one way, but when it gets past that second seal, that's what happens, it just pops in and then it's through. So, caught this second piston. As you saw, that just went nicely. So the next thing, is what you've got is you've got your forgot what you call them. Basically it's a transfer hole, which is here and here, and fluid can flow from one side to the other, so obviously all four pistons will move in and out. Now that's where them little seals go, in these two bits here. So I pick them out, and just put them in the slot, and they push in. They don't just drop in, you've got to push them into place. Find the other one and push that one in. And once you've got them sat in properly, dry your hands, because you can actually start to put the two halves together. So I'll just get some of this shit off my fingers. Once I've got them together and they're bolted together, I'll clean, as in just give them a wipe over and get the silicone based brake fluid off it. Now it doesn't harm the chroma out like that, and it's not meant to harm paint, but it's not something I'd do a common practice of, oh let's drop this all over the paint or the chrome. Just, it won't hurt it, because you can fucking guarantee that it probably will. So once it's together you can sort of... Now the proper bolts that you use to put them together are these, like multi-spline 12 pointers, but I'm using some new shiny bits. So what I'll do is I'll position it and look through to line all the holes up, just set it on nicely. Now you've got to be careful with one of them, because one of the holes on the front caliper actually goes right through the caliper and bolts onto the fork leg. So it's these two that go in. Which should be that one. Oh, numpty. Before you nip them up, just give it a feel over with your hand to make sure that the halves are lining up, and then just give them a bit of a nip up. Not fully tightening them yet. And that is the caliper sort of piece back together. But what I was saying about the end bolt hole is where it's where it screws in, but it's the one that screws in through the fork leg, through the bracket that, you dumbass, I'm not even on the camera. It's the one that screws in through the fork that holds the caliper on. It screws into the caliper, but it stays loose, that one, until it's bolted to the fork leg, as I say, and then obviously the shorter one on the bottom. So what I'll do, that one I'll just put to one side for now, and we'll get on to, well actually what I didn't do, what I should have done, is I'll get these off. I'll just top that up a bit more, because what I should have done was got them straight in as soon as that was empty. I've also got 2 sets of pads, brand new pads to go in these calipers. So when I've got them both together and tightened up and that, I'll put the new pads in as well. So I'll get these put into soak, should I say. But as I say, I know it'll be right. I can't say I've ever had one wrong yet. But just always check. 4 thick ones, they can go in. 4 thin ones, they can go in. Lay down and get covered in stuff. And then there'll be two little ones which they can go in. So, because I need to let them sit for a little bit, I'll knock you off again for 5 while I have a drink. Back soon.